historically, the reason why the 7 day week had a bit of a thorn in the flesh of like the French Revolution, because it was an atheistic revolution, it reminded the 7 day creation week. So they switched it to a 10 day, but a numerologist was one that noticed that the asylums had doubled in number, and that attributed that to not having a weekly cycle that was based on rest. And Stalin did a 5 day week. They ended poorly. They were not good outcomes. So we're designed for this. It's a natural thing. Yep.
And then if you look at the other things of preventative maintenance on it, because that's the whole thing, is everybody waits until the thing in their body broke before they go see a doctor. Nobody's very few on the preventative. I know it is now, more talked about with the diet and exercise and this sort of thing. But a lot of people really in the real world just wait until it's broken and then they go for help versus trying to be preventative, or reverse that even is the whole thing I'm looking at here. Like, how do we reverse it back to, can we live to be 120? Mm-hmm. Surely, if everything was in place and our telomeres never shrunk and we could reverse everything back, could we live to be 150? Because the times of ancients, they talked about living to be 1,000 years is the normal lifespan.
Yeah.
And then that shrunk to 600 years and then to 300 years. And now we're here at like 80 years. Like, what if it's been shown in the past of multiple different epochs of time where people live to be so much unfathomable ages? For us is 100-year lifespan. I mean, is it possible to bring that back to even add 50% on because if you're talking about being able to continue, that's the whole thing I talk about. Everybody says, I wouldn't want to be 150. I wouldn't be able to use my brain. Well, what if you were able to use your brain by rewinding that, where you never had the degradation and the whole time that you were moving forward in time, everything was perfectly functional? Now, I'd love to be 200 at that point. Is it possible? That's my whole thing. And the reversing of it and getting back to perfect functioning, and then that be your base that you move forward with from that point. And we're here in a beautiful world. Might as well use what's given to us and the technologies and devices that other people have thought of that can enhance our lives. That's my look at it.
That's amazing. Like, my mind started just go in all kinds of places when you're saying that, because I like the way you think about that, and the fact that the Bible does record these 900-year lifespans, even and it records immortality before that. And in terms of, I see things through a Christian understanding, and I always love to hear other people's points of view and everything, and I think that things can come together. But so immortality existed before then, and then immortality will be something that humans return to. And interesting in both contexts, whether it's Genesis or Revelation, they both talk about that in being in context of light. And it says even that there will be no need for the sun or the moon, because God will be their light, and there's no need for a candle because God is their light. And it talks about this, like living in the presence of God, who is light, for eternity. And there is a biophysical connection, even though it's like, a promise, or it's given as a gift. It's a miraculous thing, but it's actually a scientific process as well, to me, when I read things like that. But in terms of, could we live to 120? Could we live beyond that? I think it is very possible. And I think that these types of things get us to that, and then they get us to the highest quality of life at that. And so centenarians is something to study. And they did all have good sunlight exposure. When you think about the fact that if they're 100 and they got surveyed, 10, 20 years ago, whenever that study was by National Geographic, then they were during times when people typically got a lot more sunlight exposure.
Yeah, I'd seen that documentary, a recent one, just in the last couple of years, called The Blue Zones.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, and they what I boiled it down to is, there were great different types of foods in one place, and fresh water in another, and algae in another, and seaweeds. But what I noticed, the one thing that they all had in common, just like you said, in addition to motion, they never stopped working and walking and gardening. But at the same time, I never clued that in until you just said it. They were always outside walking. The whole thing for me, as I pinged in on it, was continuous movement. They never sat around in a chair and got sedentary. They were always still out, walking to their home, either up a hill or down a stone path. They were out at the seaside collecting something, or they were in the garden working. Even if they were just planting a small garden, they were continually moving the body. But I didn't put that there. Yeah, they're always out in the sun when they were doing those things.
Yeah. And they were out in sun and even if like there's Okinawa and you'd say, yeah, well, good for them. They're out in Japan in the beautiful Okinawa, but there was war there too. And then you've got like Loma Linda where it was largely based in America, in California, which is like an hour out of LA. And they're centenarians. My wife went to college there, university, and she's working out with 100-year-olds and they were pushing like hard. It's crazy. Like I'm not exaggerating. We just got out of CrossFit. We both competed for CrossFit. I did okay. Like I wasn't practicing. I surf, and so there's a few muscles I haven't used.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm
Talking
not gonna
about being in the
brag.
sun. Yeah. Surfing the negative ions, man, on the crashing waves. Dude, that is an age reverser in itself, getting out in
There
the
you go.
waves. Yeah.
Yeah, you feel good doing that. That's great, man. And so, yes, these things can be achieved. It was Ellsworth Wareham that was 104 when he died. He had just, and that's not that 104, yeah, people made it to there, but like, so big deal. What age did he retire as a surgeon? 95. That is remarkable. How would you feel about a 95-year-old performing active surgery on you? So he flew out to see him and cover the story. He's been in a film of mine. He declined interviews at age like 103. So imagine being active and serving, and he died without cognitive decline and without aches and pains. And so I think that people don't realize if you look at the patterns that you just talked about, it's heavily about diet. It's about using the mind. Is about learning new skills and having strong social connections. And it's about forgiveness. It can be about faith practice. In the case of the group from Loma Linda, they had a weekly Sabbath. They rested their bodies at least one day a week. And most importantly, on that, well, that one day a week was critical for them. There, these are ancient practices. Ancient practices, like if you translate the word uh, Saturday, which is like often Sabado, like over 100 languages, it translates as a Sabbath. It's just in our word, which means rest. That's how it translates. We're supposed to have these rests. People are missing them because they're too ambitious. Um, but it gets given back to you. You do the calculation on like this the Loma Linda 7 Day Adventist, an example, and you look at okay, how many extra years did they live on average, and that 11 years extra that they were getting. If you do a calculation on them giving up a day a week for like the average lifespan, which would be like around 70 or 75, they gave a day to God and they got it back in lifespan and health span. So does that make sense?
That's a fair trade.
Yeah. You got a relaxing day with your family without doing work, and then it got given back to you in extra lifespan and health span. So just look, I think people are going to take away that. That's free. That is free. And then like the weekends are typically the time to do that. Sunday is the one that's done more, but the one the Bible talks about is Saturday, Sabbath, the seventh day. So why is that? Is there frequencies on that day that are actually rest frequencies? There's animals that know it and they do it. There's some beavers that do it and some flies that do it. They do it without any kind of imposition and they're filmed doing it. It's like, why are they doing it on this seventh day of on a Saturday at doing a sundown to sundown, Friday night to Saturday night. Anyway, that stuff is fascinating. And if you look at historically, the reason why the 7 Day week had a bit of a thorn in the flesh of like the French Revolution, because it was an atheistic revolution, it reminded the 7 Day creation week. So they switched it to a 10 day, but a numerologist was one that noticed that the Silems had doubled in number and that attributed that to not having a weekly cycle that was based on rest. And Stalin did a 5 day week. They ended poorly. They were not good outcomes. So we're designed for this. It's a natural thing.
Because again, what is history given to us? Because a lot of these days and Saturnilla or Saturna or something with a Saturday. I mean, if you're going, that's the seventh day. But so, when we come into October, November, December, well, Deci is a 10. Well, are we missing a couple months here? Like, how do these things get all
Julius
filtered
and
out? And if we
Augustus
go back to some
throwing
of the
in their
more
months.
older languages, yeah. And I mean, you could go on forever. And then, the frequency and vibration. I mean, if there's a construct holding this together that has a vibration in it, well, then, animals are much more in tune with that. So perhaps they're finding that looping current flow in there that they tap into and they feel it again. Okay. it's back again. Okay, wait until it ceases, then
Yeah,
we'll start work again. It's something like this. I mean,
that's
we
cool.
only just understand. We can't even, you being understanding light. How much of the entire spectrum of light? How much do we absorb and can we see in the wavelengths with our eyes? I under 1%, or is that too low? I mean, totally of everything that's out there for the human eye to perceive
True.
in the spectrum wavelength, it's very almost it's negligible comparatively.
Well, yeah, exactly. To what exists, like with the millions of like receptors that we have in our nose, we're smelling all kinds of things that we think are like, well, this isn't good, but subconsciously there are actually things that attract us, and with microbiome and postbiotics, and so we're picking up these things through our senses, our eyes. I don't know what the number is, but I know that um, that like that optical range and every fraction within that optical range from 600 to 1100, any 1 degree or fractional degree of change, they're all incredibly beneficial for the mitochondria. Once you get over 1100, once you get over 600, then under 600, the 480 and the 590, they're beneficial, but it's less on the mitochondria. It's that optical window is pivotal for the mitochondria. It's not the only function. Far infrared is amazing, which you're talking about, 2000, 3000, 4000 nanometers of penetration, but that's going to raise the core body temperature, and it's good for that reason. So you do a lot of good by doing a sauna 3 times a week. It will change your life and your health. So it is a great thing to do. We actually even offer a sauna blanket. So instead of paying like $5,000 for something and putting in your basement and forgetting about it, you get inside of a blanket, for several $100s, and then you're able to just turn it on while you're watching whatever you want to watch, like an interview with David. And then thanks for having me on. And yeah, myredlight.com, you can watch more of the trainings, watch more, or just kind of say, look, I'm ready. I want to make this decision. I encourage you, jump on that, make that decision.